and dream interpretation workshops. Originally a photojournalist, Brian was a special education teacher for 26 years with degrees in psychology and child development. He's the author of the book, For Channels, Healers, and Helpers. He has done more than 400 trance readings for all adults and children, each unique, and all drawing on the Akashic Record. He teaches this material as well. Please welcome Brian Berry.
That was a red-hot introduction. Wow. So I'm looking around and I see very few people whom I don't know, but I do see two people I don't know yet. But I love to come and I love to see the people I love. I can't get this anywhere else, you know. This is it. I left a word out of my talk title, How to Relate to a Spiritual Teacher in the Flesh. Okay, we've got volumes and volumes of material on how to relate to your spiritual teacher, and you could say it's the whole point of ILC, how to relate to the teacher we have inside. But I'm talking about something a little more street level. How do we relate to a teacher in the flesh? Now, if you've been coming here for a while, you have probably heard every funny story about Paul Solomon that exists. And a lot of us had experiences with Paul which were, I don't want to say quixotic exactly, but if you thought when you met Paul you were going to take a short walk with Jesus, you would get a surprise. Because, in the first place, he said, I'm not the new Jesus, I'm the first Paul Solomon, and he meant it. And in the second place, he had a sense of humor which is very hard to convey. And then the third thing is, he could be very challenging without even trying. And he was challenging to every one of us, I think, at one point or another. So if you come here, in particular if you tell people you've come to Virginia Beach because you're going to go to the Fellowship of the Inner Light, they're going to pop up and tell a story which they believe reflects badly on Paul. I'm going to address that, but I'm going to address something a little more up to date as well. Paul did many things as a teacher which were meant to be initiations. He did hand out mystery lessons right and left, honestly. And so it was very easy to misunderstand him. It was very easy to overlook how precisely those incidents that got our goats were designed. He wasn't easy to be with sometimes. And like real mystery lessons, they weren't easily understood. They don't sum up neatly. Tidily is probably the better word. And he knew that. And he enjoyed it. If you could see Paul sometimes delivering a mystery lesson, he would chuckle. And when he chuckled, it said to me, I just said that, and I'm not backing down. Well, I had my moments when I wondered if Paul was the real thing. Well, here I am now, almost 50 years later. So I won't go on and on about just how much Paul was the real thing. He really was. And what it's like to have him in my heart, and occasionally showing up in my readings, it's a thrill every time. And the contribution that he makes every time is pure Paul and challenging. Not to me, but to the seeker. I wind up saying things to seekers that I would never say in my street guise. I do tell people, you need to make a fundamental change in your life, and you should start today. And I ask things that are outrageously demanding, as he did. But that's not even my subject here today. Paul used to say over and over, and it was an important part of every inner light consciousness experience, the people around you are teachers. You can learn from all of them. Well, you can. And there's a part that I would have added, and I did add it when I taught ILC. If you will trouble to love them. Now, that wasn't always so easy because many of the people who came to an ILC experience in the 1970s were far out. At least they seemed so. And I can say to you, standing here almost 50 years later, many of the people who come to this church are far out. They're not far out if we love them, and we do. Now, I had the experience of bringing my wife here last year. Well, I can tell you how she feels about psychic readings. She'll accept anything from a psychic with an MD from Harvard. She has a lot of trouble with the material that she says I pull out of the air. Well, what can I say to her? That's precisely where I get it. So I have to point out and say, well, this person got better and that person got better. But she's uncomfortable with what I do. She loves me because she watched me work as a school psychologist for 26 years, and she was a professor of school psychology. So she knows good work when she sees it. It's a good thing because it is a very different point of view from her evidence-based, published in a juried journal point of view about life. I love her, and I tell her this, but she doesn't believe me. She is a person who, mainspring is justice. It's no accident that she's in special education. She wants justice, for there's people born with a chance in life that is not quite equal to most of us. That's what makes her tick. So I'm okay. And I want to get back to that original point. Some of us who come here to this fellowship could be seen as strange. We have beliefs, interests, sometimes costumes, a little out of the ordinary. And are we all teachers to each other? Yes, in precisely the point, in precisely the way that Paul mentioned. But I want to say something else. And when you come here and you listen to these folks whom you have known and met and stood out there in the foyer and talked with, you get into a special state of mind. We go up the terraces to get into that state of mind, and we begin to perceive them as they really are. We have wonderful teachers here. And some of them are teaching in spheres that we don't know very much about. And isn't that a shame? So if I were going to retitle this talk, I would probably retitle it Lesson 1, No Gossip. Gossip hurts us. It hurts us as a family. It diminishes us as students of the marvelous teachers that come here. And we sometimes forget, especially as we go around Virginia Beach, every time someone comes up with a piece of gossip about Paul or the fellowship, gosh, it's time to take a stand. Tell them how you really feel. So that would be the base lesson. Did I have doubts when Paul was here on earth? Yes, I did. I didn't understand many of the things that he did. Some of them, honestly, didn't just bother me, they offended me. And I did say to myself, if I had the gifts Paul has, then I wouldn't do A and B and C the way Paul does. Well, as some of you know, I was with the fellowship 4 or 5 years, and then I left and stayed away for 30 years. And it's because I did focus on those false as I perceive them? Well, I would probably still say, if I met somebody on the street who's doing some of those things, you need to clean up your act, buddy. But no, I'm not saying that about Paul. I was reconciled in an instant. I had a teacher friend who had the boy in the bubble disease. That's a collapse of the immune system, and it goes on for a long time. I've brought her here. Some of you know her. And I cared very much for her, and I understood what a wonderful teacher she was because her classroom was next to mine. Now, I was actually a school psychologist, but for the last 10 years of my life, I went back to the classroom where I felt I could do more good than I could alone in a testing room with a test kit. I knew how good a teacher she was, and I wanted to help. So what felt to me like a risk, I brought her home to my living room, and I told her about ILC, and I took her up the terraces and into the temple. Now, she entered my living room with 2 canes, with knees that would not bend, sighing with every step because of the pain. So we went up the terraces and into the temple, and we spent about 25 minutes in the temple in silence, more time than I would ordinarily give first time in the temple. And when we came back down, she stood up and threw the canes away and danced out of the living room on the way home. Well, that healing did not last. There is a change of consciousness required when you have a healing, an instant healing. And I'll just glance briefly at what that was. It was sarcasm. Most of us indulge in a little sarcasm from time to time, and she did too. But in her private thinking, sarcasm was her principal defense. Sarcasm costs you. That jolt of negativity that you send out with a sarcastic remark lands in your own being. And so she reverted back to her disease state in about a month. Now, I've said these things to her, and she says, "Oh, shucks, that can't be true. I've been sarcastic all my life." Well, I'm not done with her yet. We'll get there one of these days. But all the forms of negativity that we indulge ourselves in, especially with our tongues, honestly, cost us. They do, in fact, come back and land in our beings. It distresses me very much when someone grabs my shirt collar out there in the foyer and tells me a story at Paul's expense, or a story at the expense of one of the people who was here. And that does happen. So when we just heard Nanette speak. Is she still here? No. I'm going to use her as an example. It's easy to not see what a teacher she is until you hear her teach. Because you can look at her and you can say, oh, well, she's not like me. She's this and she's that and she's the other thing. That's what we do to each other. And then you hear her teach and the doors open and you see her as she truly is. I want to say that's true of everybody I can see as I look around this room. Now, some of us have stood up and claimed our identity as teachers, and some of us keep it under wraps. It's there, just the same. I'll say a simple thing. Each one of us has an inner man or woman. Each one of us has the teacher we meet on the fourth terrace. Every one of those teachers is a teacher. Each and every one of us has a miracle-working, super wise teacher inside us. When we say yes to who we really are, we share that with the world. That's not very different from what Paul used to say. But I am sure that if Paul were out there in the foyer, when somebody grabs me right here and tells me some awful story, he would stand up and say, "Don't listen to that." I think he might say, "Go home and pray for that person. Shower that person with gifts, their gifts. Use your temple to see what their gifts are, and pray that they be made more manifest." When I pray for a person before a reading or in another setting, such as a special ed classroom, I don't pray for them to straighten out. I don't pray for them to stop doing these terrible things that I know they sometimes do. I pray for them to step into their gifts. And I do use what abilities I have to see what those gifts are. Now, I have had in my classroom, I don't want to shock you, I have had kids who break the law, sometimes very seriously. Okay, so that does include murders and rapes. And I need to teach them. What am I trying to teach them? To pay attention to the lessons we teach in school. They need to know them. Some of them were not so easy to pray for. Some of them I had to summon all of my ILC to pray for. Some of them I didn't like. That brings me back to the story about the woman who had the boy in the bubble disease. Unquestionably, she was healed in that moment. And she left and she went home, and I sat back in my chair and said, "Wow, that really went well." And Paul walked in my door and said, "I'm proud of you." And in that moment, I loved him again. I stopped telling myself stories about his deficiencies because I was full of love. Would I have heard that if I hadn't just healed somebody? Probably not. All my defenses were down. And when my defenses are down, I loved the man. I think we can all do that. I think you can do that with the person who's sitting next to you, no matter what you may think of their foibles and little habits and their deficiencies. I think it's something we can practice. And I don't mean as a formula. I do mean full bore into the meadow, up the terraces, into the temple, put that person in the healing window, see their gifts, and bless them with their gifts. Bless them with the happiness they're capable to make, even if we can't see it in our ordinary state. I think that's what makes this family, I was almost going to say congregation, but no, it's a family. That's what holds this family together. So I hope you remember that. If any of you want to walk up and tell me a bad thing about another person in this family, we know very well we wouldn't do it about our sister or our brother. And what have we got here? A room full of sisters and brothers. We really, really do. It sometimes happens that when I do a reading, I see which of these sister and brothers has been terribly important in a former life. And we will sometimes dismiss former life information, saying, "Oh, that's just a former life." That's just your deepest attitudes and your greatest loves. That's what's in a former life. When we're born, we enter this earth with the hologram of what we can be. An image in all dimensions. What's it made up from? I am that I am. That sum of former lives and that sum of experiences we've prepared to go through in this life. That's what I am that I am is. And that includes cosmic dimensions. Especially it includes those times in other lives when we have sensed and made our own the cosmic dimension that's right in front of us. So, yes, sometimes when you meet somebody you're new in a form of life, what comes back is bitterness, anger, disappointment, condemnation, because that's what you experienced. Well, when that happens, then it is more than ever time to pray. So if you're sitting here in the same room with somebody you don't like, someone you would rather not have come to your living room, that's the person you need to pray for. And not, please conform to something I can enjoy more than the way I see you now. No. Your prayer is, please come into your gifts, and I'm going to see them now, and I'm going to give them to you in temple consciousness so that you will have them to use here and now at street level, in your family, in your business, in your job, in all those settings. We are a tremendous gift to each other. There is no place else on this earth that I can go and look out at a room full of people and see what I see when I look out on this room. It is precious beyond my power to give it words, really. So, if one of you rubs me the wrong way, I know where the problem is. It's not in you. It's in me. Some part of me that is judging, some part of me that is holding on to God knows what resentment. And we've talked about pushing buttons. That's an earthbound phrase. We should say, some part of you has awakened former life memories. So now I have a handle on what I need to do when I get you in the temple, whether you're with me or not, whether I tell you or not. Those moments of irritation, this is pure ILC, that's your prayer list. And what kind of prayer? Let me give you the gifts that I truly see are yours. Let me help you move into the life that is the best that you can be. And that's a gift. It's a gift to me, too. This is a mature group of spiritual seekers. You know that what you pray for another comes to you as well. You can't heal another person without being healed yourself. But there's not much point in dwelling on that principle. You might make something selfish out of it. No, you won't be feeling blissful when you pray for someone who has wronged you, especially if the wrong is recent and personal. It doesn't make me feel good. When I have to forgive somebody who has done something I see as wrong, if it's cost me, I confess. That's hard work. I don't always get there the first time. If I don't feel my heart open, if I don't honestly reach temple consciousness while I pray for that person, goodness, we're not done. We're going to have to come back and do it again. Does that happen to me? Yes. Yes, it does happen to me. I am not so, I suppose the word is, developed, that I can pass through the world like a beatific cloud, spreading blessings here and there. Now, I see things, and they bother me. I did a reading a while back, I'm forgetting how many months it's been now, for someone whose father was an ambassador to Southeast Asian countries at the time of the Vietnam War, and she has made her way in the world of international philanthropy. And in the course of the reading, she stopped me and she said, "Will you help me pray for Henry Kissinger? I really hate him." He had just died. I didn't find that easy. I wasn't real fond of Henry Kissinger either, but I didn't know him personally as she did. So we did that. and it was as if the box burst open. And I gave her a prescription in the course of that reading. In this life, she runs philanthropies that are specifically for the unhoused and the formerly incarcerated. And I said, there's someone waiting for you. It's a band of Buddhist monks in Thailand, and you need to go. And she says, oh my God, I walked into the living room 2 days ago, and there was a band of Buddhist monks saying, where are you? So I went ahead and told her she needs to go to Thailand and launch this work. I can't do that in my ordinary guise. It is so intrusive. And I might say, so likely to earn me a reputation I don't enjoy. But I did say that to her. She hasn't gone yet. But I'm not sorry that I said it. I'm not sorry that I saw it. And it turns out that the government of Thailand was one of the countries that he was legal advisor to. Legal advisor is nice talk for, he was John F. Kennedy's right arm out there in Thailand in those years. And he told the people, he told the leaders what John F. Kennedy expected of them. So, I'm just giving away my age and her age too, I guess. That's all right. Now I'll try to do this for the next few minutes without telling another story. These stories do take time. ILC as such is not about forgiveness as such. It is certainly about loving people, loving them with your highest, best self. We are certainly human. Some forgiveness is required every time, isn't it? At least, at the very least, self-forgiveness. Can I look around at the people I know and meet and work with and not judge them? And I mean at the simplest level. The kids in the middle school, the last school I served, I would ask them every year, what do you notice first about a kid when you meet him? And they said, his shoes. And that's true. They really cared about shoes, and they really ranked other kids on the scale of how cool their shoes were. Well, I think we do the same thing when we judge a person because of their dress, because of their accent, because of their clues to prosperity. I know that I do sometimes. I have a hard time, not judging people who belong to a different political party than mine. I have that problem. I've had it all my life. Simeon, my son, the poet, says, Dad, are you over your class rage yet? Well, not 100%, honestly. No. And I'm going to catch that signal and adjust it in the moment, but it still occurs. Not just for me, I know, but for other folks who may have grown up in public housing or in some other situation that you really didn't want your friends to know too much about. So, yeah, that's an issue. So I'm going to wrap it up now. I want you to think back right now to someone you've judged here in this building today, even if it was as simple as thinking their shoes weren't good or their hair wasn't perfect, or they say things that are a little bit off or funny. Just close your eyes for a minute. See yourself in the temple. Turn to the healing window. Put that person in the healing window. and ask first to see their gifts, their genuine gifts, both manifest and unmanifest. And now pray that they come into those gifts, right here, street level, in reality. Sometimes that'll be hard if you think that person is foolish or dumb or very, very different from you in any dimension. Do it now in the healing window. All right, I see eyes opening. So we'll stop this. And we'll say, thank God for the variety of people we get here. Thank God for the extraordinary, varied nature of their gifts, which in so many cases are gifts the world despises. And we'll stop now and we'll go out to the foyer, go to the bathroom, get some coffee, and love one another. Thank you.